but you know. All you there, Mr. Lawrence.
All right.
I had to shave mine down a little bit. Getting very fun looking. 70s.
So tonight's work session, we're going to go through kind of the O&M operations and maintenance portion of the budget. What I provided, what was in your board packet was up to date as a couple weeks ago. What I put on your board packet is current numbers as of beginning of this week, where basically it captured revenues from sales tax and some extra expenses around payroll and such, so that we'd be more accurate for our year-end estimation. So basically the changes were in the red column because those are our actual numbers. The green column, then I updated a few things in there. And then the draft budget, we've made a few modifications and such. And I added the percentages so that you can see kind of where some of the changes are. One of the ones that Katie, you mentioned last time was the big change in grants to other organizations that having a big jump, and it's offset by art and public spaces, changing money from being a line item within public works to funding. Here's direct funding for Fraser Valley Arts to come to the board and make a request. So basically, we still have general fund is not 100% in balance yet. The other sub funds are, but I just want to walk through this with you and see if there are questions in each section from you, so I can answer those and call out any issues that you may see as far as, are we over budgeting, under budgeting, and kind of the operations and management pieces. So we're going to start with the general fund on the revenue side, which is this mostly the first page, and mine's a little bit off from yours because I went to a landscape instead of portrait. On the revenue projections for us, are there any big questions that jumped out at you on the budget? Yep.
More people are smoking, or did the tax rate go up?
It's not one that we actually control at all. The state, it's an allocation out to us. And so they were actually over collecting for a while. And so they cut us off for a few months, and then we started collecting once it all got back in balance. It's not one that I have a good formula on.
A lot of money.
No, it's not. I think the 4,200 might be a little optimistic, but because it's been jumping around, it's kind of hard to get a gauge on where that's going to end up.
It did go up though.
It did.
I mean, per pack.
Okay.
I mean, not the total, but
So the cigarette tax is
That may be-
not just the sales tax aspect of it.
do any of you know how much a pack of cigarettes costs?
$8.
Eight would be, I think there is one at 8, but 10, 11.
Wow.
Wow. One pack.
Uh-huh.
I'm getting them for a quarter back.
Back in the day.
Starting to beat the price of whiskey per gram, probably.
That should be great, right? I grew up in North Carolina. It was a lot cheaper than this.
So we were seriously overly optimistic last year, the budget this year. and
In
our
terms
tax- our
of-
property tax. Oh,
So the property tax, there was a business property tax that hadn't been collected. It was supposed to be bounced back this year, and that's why the property tax was the general fund property tax was so high, projecting so high. We reached out to the county, but haven't gotten confirmation, and it was about 150,000. So
okay.
we're on track for where we should be in terms of actual property taxes, which is our mill levy from the property values, which will stay consistent for next year, which is why the projected budget is not much different because the assessors, it's an off year, so they'll use the same data they had prior, except for new sales.
So we might still be getting those dollars this year. It's hard to say.
Hard to say.
Okay.
The county lost a lot of people in the treasurer's office, and so getting information from them is a little bit harder right now.
So, distribution.
So the distribution is the building department, Winter Park Building Department, takes in fees and funds, and then you allocate between Winter Park, Granby, and Fraser the actual use of the building department, and we were under our use for the fees that were collected, and so they gave us a distribution back. It's an allocation from the building department where we kind of overpaid at the front end, and we got some back this year.
So it's for the building department.
Yep.
Permitting and all that.
Yep. And I will call out that grants, grants are going to show up pretty low in our budget in the foreseeable future. We got a big grant to buy Victoria Village, but that's kind of come and gone in terms of revenue. It's been converted into a land asset. But most grants right now through DOLA are matching funds or reimbursable. So you have a letter that you kind of have a letter of credit that you can tap into, but it's not something you recognize as revenue until you actually spend the money.
The best news is that our sales tax is up.
Yep, we've actually, as of now, we've covered what we budgeted for sales tax for the year, which is a good thing. This is the 4% of the 5%. And we've been trending that way, but we're always hedging back a little bit. So my projections for 2023 are going back to kind of more in line with 2020 pre-COVID. In terms of sales tax revenues, I do anticipate that we might be above that.
Seems like pay as you throw bounces around a lot.
It does. It's there's the actually paying as you throw the bags, and then there's the buying of the bags at retail stores, which we invoice for them. So there's a lag in those numbers. But yeah, it goes in surges, kind of like water and wastewater utility billing on the quarter. Pay as you throw almost follows a quarterly pattern.
Do we know what percentage of that is the single use fees coming in?
That's down below 2630, I think.
I'll say yes and no. We've got sometimes where it codes a little funny, and we have to go back and do manual entries. We can figure it out, but it's not teased out here as well.
The disposable bag fees, does that mean at the store or the yellow bags?
Disposable bag fees is at the store, but what we're charging the store, not what they actually collect. Oh, this is for pay as you throw, the yellow bags. You're talking about the bag fees for grocery store bags, like the plastic bags.
What is 630?
Got
Is
it.
that
For plastic bags for the disposal.
at the
Yes.
store?
At a store. That's gonna go away and then
26.
It's going away.
Well, but it's going to be paid by the state. They're gonna, well, no, plastic bags are going away in 24.
Oh, they're not gonna even have.
Statewide.
Yeah.
You have to bring your own or use paper.
I don't remember what the paper issue is. Everybody has to charge in the state starting next year. And then the year after it goes away.
Front range. You actually pay for both plastic and paper bags.
Well, as you do here.
You do that. You do that too, so the paper bags are also a fee.
Mhm.
Yeah, I got reused bags.
Any other questions on the revenue side? The last line in revenue, I will call out unassigned fund balance. Basically, that's your revenues minus your expenses for the year. What's left over is unassigned fund balance, and that carries forward to the next year. That number is going to change. It jumps around a lot right now. And so that's where I look at our, when we, after we do expenses and look at the deficit and stuff, that's going to change quite a bit. Cause if you look at prior years, it has pretty major swings, by multi-million-dollar swings. That's, very bottom of, revenues is 1039,999. And what we have projecting forward for next year is only 239,000. But that's going to change a lot. So. So going down, continue with general funds, expenditures. We have kind of, it's broken out into three parts really. Town board, administration, and public works, and then a little bit of an other column. But that's, want to look at kind of town board stuff. This was where the big increase, grants and aids to agencies. And this was the moving that number up with the idea that Fraser Valley Arts was really intertwined with town operations. And so we don't do that with any other nonprofit. And so trying to separate that out so that in events like Mural Festival, we can run the operations, we can run the event, all the fundraising and financing and the financial transactions become theirs to own. And so they would come to the town board and ask for an amount of money to support their nonprofit, which we've done with other nonprofits. And that shows the town board giving continued support to them for their grants and such. So that's kind of the new separation that we're looking to create.
Quick question for you, Rob.
Yep.
Under intergovernmental agreements,
Mhm.
last IGA that we signed with the Fraser Valley Housing Partnership.
Mhm. It's not in there right now.
It's not in there right now.
No.
Are we waiting to see if the ballot measure passes?
Yep.
Why are we waiting for the?
The intergovernment agreement said that ballot measure doesn't pass, that 4-H2s would kick in $10,000 a piece. Find out about the ballot measure in 2 weeks. If it passes, then we don't get that at the 17th.
I don't remember, is that per year or is that just a one time?
I think it's for year 1 and maybe year 2.
So that measure
check it.
passes, it's supposed.
I'm not sure. I know it's at least for the first year. I just
That
don't
could be
remember
never.
if it's the second.
Could be.
One of these, just so you know, is there's a in community housing 1041,874. We had 800,000 in there for that helped with the Victoria Village purchase. That number's dropped to 255, which was under our capital campaign, and that line item will actually be transferred into the Fraser Housing Authority at the very bottom of the budget. So that's a here it is, and then it's going to come up later, and that'll be a transfer to support community housing. Any questions on the town board portion? Then we'll move into administration. And this is one where I did make a change after a conversation with Ed today, just as that I want to call it is on legal fees and administration. I bumped that up as a just in case right now. And then everything else, let me see, is mostly in line with the exception of our insurance went up a chunk this year. It used to be teased out between different funds. Now it's all consolidated administration, and we've had 4 claims this year. So
Or which line item is?
that was under administration. It is 10. Let me see, 1045 430. It's where it jumps 68%.
So what type of claim? So that's just like liability insurance?
Liability and workman's comp, and this is all kind of rolled together right now. Damage to vehicles during plowing, trees falling on private property, on buildings and such that were, town trees. And we have a couple other workman's comps and other things.
A line item for work continuity is 0. But
Yeah, it got rolled into the overall insurance for this year. And that's where we can tease things out. So the percentage of it going up 68% looks big, but it was actually about a 7% increase in the individual line items.
does that mean that your premium going up? Because if you have insurance, you shouldn't get it.
Premiums went up.
So the premium going up.
Yeah. And this was a big assessment year to figure out buildings and vehicles and such. And so we were able to take off a bunch of vehicles that were on old policies or that we sold. So we were doing some things to try to control that insurance line item, but the open claims for this year are always the challenge.
Is that covered under the Fraser policy? Some of that?
Which
Is it Fraser?
Sursa,
Yes. This is liability.
Workers' comp doesn't come out of Fraser. The other property claims do.
Hmm.
So is a social, let's say a premium in this bucket or in another bucket?
it's in this one.
So all departments, all policies.
Correct. We are seeing some of our kind of property management and postage and things like that go down projected for next year because we've kind of had one-off big expenses to cover specific projects within those. And so that next year they will be, we're going back to kind of normal operations within those properties. And going away from paper billing, saving a lot in postage. Saves about $4,000 each quarter.
No, so where?
Right.
Yep. Yep.
Where are the opportunities to reduce our?
Yeah, let me get to the end and I can kind of talk about it. So there are not a ton of opportunities without changing programs and priorities.
How about the natural gas increase?
Yeah,
Yep.
it's like.
I noticed that on my latest bill.
Yep.
Is that just their cost?
Double.
Yeah, natural gas has gone up, I think 75%. And yeah, just for the actual just cost of
That
gas.
has nothing to do with the war.
Doesn't have.
No,
No.
no. It's yeah, natural gas is one that everybody, it's been kind of super low for so long. It's been trending down and now it's coming back with a force.
Yeah.
So we've had to revise all the utility budgets for that.
Like 1977.
Too much fun to remember.
Moving on to the public works portion. And this is where we have, well, combination of admin and public works is where we have professional services, reimbursable. Public Works has professional services that they use for engineering for a road cut that we're doing. And administration, public, we have things that town is buying, but also things that we bill through. But we have some big things that are in the property management in terms of within the Public Works. One is the Fraser River Trail. We had $160,000 budgeted, but we've only spent about 1,000. Two bridges have not been or been delayed on their arrival, so we haven't been able to install those. So that's something that's pushed into the next year's budget.
The property management fees, is that just general upkeep?
Yeah, these are all town assets. And so this is us managing them or doing capital improvements on them, or one of them was 6W, which is that 1060 687. That one had a lot to do with storm water maintenance and stuff. And we, instead of contracting that out, we were able to do that ourselves this year.
Seems like capital expenditures should be in a different.
They are, it's there's 1060 730 is capital projects. And so in the past, what's happened with the budget is there's been, most of it's been spread out within the different like, so engineering fees or street improvements and such. And now we're trying to lump those back under a capital. And so that you can look at a capital project and see all the different funding streams going into it. On a sheet like this, it's kind of hard to see. But there are lots of things that are capital, that are bigger than a $5,000 line item that could be capitalized. But if normal operations is 25,000, we're not going to capitalize everything for it. And so we try to make the capital stuff a little bit more specific to, here's a true individual standalone project within the overall budget. Any items under?
Old school house park.
Yep. So we had a big budget amount there that we had budgeted for the sprinkler replacement. But instead of doing that, they installed a new sprinkler system. And that was significantly cheaper, but we haven't gotten the whole billing for that. So it hasn't posted in this account. But I've carried that budget forward, not knowing if there was any other improvements slated. So something like that is a way of saying, oh, we're going to do some savings here because we're not carrying certain things forward. Yes. Let's see.
Been a long time.
Yeah, so some of these
It's
are,
gone. It was a
yeah.
gas station. It was a gas station that we had here.
yeah, there's some line items that are still in here that, we haven't closed out fully. So
No, it's about building right up from Sharpies.
Okay.
Goranson is a family name in the Claytons.
mhm.
That's why. It's named.
I've been fortunate. I've been since the 80s.
So under outdoor activity center, this is mostly HTA. And then I'll roll transfers and fiscal agent into here. The fiscal agent changes periodically as we bill to JFF. The transfers are one thing that I want to call out, is this is where we're going to see a lot of churn. There's not a lot that's happening here. You can see in the reds, there's a bunch of zeros. Basically, if you move money into smaller funds, moving it back is a little bit trickier. It takes board approval. And so these have all been approved transfers. I've been waiting to get real numbers. And so that we're only going to transfer what we need to transfer to cover expenses within those funds. And probably the prime example there would be, it says transfer to CAF. That's the capital asset fund. We had budgeted 750,000. This was for mill overlay on Wapiti and Rendezvous and change order for extra patch of some other spots. That total is going to come in closer to that 575. And so instead of moving 750 into that fund, we're only going to move 575 and preserve more in the general fund.
The transfer to the water fund
Mhm.
is a big one.
Yes.
And one of my future questions was going to be to explain the water fund and the wastewater fund and how they all interact with the joint facilities.
Perfect. I will do my best on that. I can do the wastewater fund and the water fund. The interaction with joint facilities is always a little bit trickier. And we'll go into the funds in just a second. I want to look at the general fund in total is where we have our total revenues, total expenses. If you look in the far right side at the bottom of that general fund unassigned fund balance, that's where we're showing up a negative. I don't like that. We can't actually submit that to the state. So the way you can fill a negative is you pull from reserves and commit reserves to fill that balance. You cut expenses or change your revenues to get it into balance. I don't think we're gonna have to pull from reserves. Where I think we're gonna see a change is the unassigned balance right now that I'm projecting for was that 240,000. If you look at prior years, that's fluctuated between 2 million to 4 million to almost 4.5 million down to 2.5 million, under 2.5 million. It's had some pretty wild swings. And so depending on where we end up setting our unassigned balance for next year, will change that the red in that far right column. I want to cannibalize the general fund because that's the easiest one for me to work in, but I made sure all the other funds came out with a positive balance. So are there any questions or concerns about general fund? So that's where we are the fiscal agent for the JFOC, and we bill back and forth for salaries and such, and management fees, and it shows up negative and it shows up positive and it bounces. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit, and just for these other funds, just so you know, it's color coded on the left side. So we're going to talk about the yellow color coding, which is the restricted revenue fund. This is the 1% of sales tax that's dedicated. It's restricted to three things. First priority is the Lyft transportation service. The second priority is trails and public transit that's not motorized. And the last one is capital projects. We have not used it for many capital projects because we usually are soaking that up in the Lyft and HTA. So this fund this year is actually doing really, really well because Winter Park got a grant and is basically sharing that out in their allocations for the Lyft services. And so, but they've just inked a new contract with First Transit. And we're going from kind of 400,000 to 600,000 a year that we were kind of planning on. So now we're at, the most recent projection is $1,003,368. And that is the cost at full service, winter, summer, and basically, trying to get drivers so that we're running half-hour routes instead of hourly routes. So this number is what we project to be the most optimal or pessimistic version of an expense. But that is something that's going to eat a chunk of this fund. And I've talked to HTA, the carry forward that we're going to have supports everything that we had planned for next year. It's the year after, that this is going to lead to some challenging decisions in terms of this revenue is capped around $900,000. And I don't think it's going to jump up dramatically in the next year. And so when our transit system is over 1 million and we have 900,000 in dedicated revenue coming in, the math doesn't work for very long. So that's one that will come up in the future when we talk about how do we generate revenues and such. But one thing is, if we mess with sales tax, that is one place that this, could bring this back into balance, or we need to prioritize things a little differently. Either on the transit side of what we want to provide, or scaling back trail activities, or committing general fund dollars to this. So this is one I'm looking at, but not really for this year, but for next year, definitely. Are there any questions about the restricted revenue?
We'll be able to use the rental fees that we've passed.
Not for this. They're tied into that. They're tied into the general funds under the community housing. So, well, there are two things. One is the application fee for an STR. That goes into the general fund under community housing. The ordinance that we just passed is tied into the Fraser Housing Authority at the tail end of the budget. And that's committed, that ordinance, to that fund.
I just think that busing system is impacted by rentals, so.
Yep.
Get money, keep the bus going.
Yeah.
I was privy to that conversation.
But I will say that one is the revenue from that is pretty low right now.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's going to be one that probably won't fix the issue with the transit and the 1% sales tax revenue. I'm going to talk about the conservation trust fund. Is not a big deal. Buy lottery tickets, please. GoCo, lottery proceeds goes into the Colorado Conservation Trust. We get quarterly disbursements from them. It goes to trails and such. We're using this. We're actually transferring this into the Cousins Open Ranch Space Fund to fund trails, the trail building in that fund right now. And we're able to move things back and forth there. But this one doesn't see much activity.
So we get revenue from the lottery tickets.
Not a lot, about $3,000 or $4,000 every quarter.
It goes to the community that it was bought in.
I think so. I'm not sure if it's an allocation across populations or where tickets were purchased.
I was always in the impression that it was a Facebook population.
I thought it was a population thing, but
So if someone wants to buy a winning ticket here in Grant County, we wouldn't necessarily get a cut of that.
No.
Convenience store does, but we wouldn't.
No. Yeah, this is purely a line item within the Colorado lottery. The revenues they bring in, it's like a restricted revenue that goes into their what is it called? The conservation trust fund at the state level. And then they distribute that out, and it's dedicated to trails and open space. And then there's some grants they can do for if you're building a park or something like that, that they you can tap into some proceeds there.
So based on a per rata share of the population.
Yep.
Isn't a lot of that lottery money that educational?
Yeah, the lottery revenue, in order to get passed, had to be tied to a lot of kind of restricted restricted areas where they could say, hey, we're going to collect this money and this is how we're going to distribute it out across the state. The capital equipment replacement fund. This is one where we do get highway use tax dollars. And then we have actually the sale of surf assets, which is the capital equipment replacement fund. We've sold 5 vehicles this year, and that's the $71,260. So we're selling surf assets. We're using that to help buy future assets. And then most of the rest is coming in, transfers in from general fund and from public works. So if the utility team needs a truck, part of that truck cost comes from water and wastewater funds. They get transferred into here. This is kind of where we manage all of our vehicles. And in the past, we've had kind of once the police department has used a vehicle and is passing it on, we would take that on. And as much fun as it would be to take the police vehicles and do races out at the wastewater treatment plant, we are actually going to start trading those in instead of taking ownership and then moving them back through this fund. So we seem to be in pretty good shape with most of our vehicles. We have a couple capital purchases planned for next year. But everything else is, we feel like we're in a stable spot until we figure out what the next wave of vehicles we're going to need to purchase. It is nice that we've paid off all our leases on our skid steers and bobcats and stuff. And so, and the big trucks. So everything is fully paid for in ours at this point, and we're working to maintain it to get us another couple of years before we have to make another big purchase, unless we accept the tipping point on roads is really what drives us to get another vehicle. No pun intended. Any questions on the vehicle stuff? I'm kind of trying to speed up a little bit so we can get to the water, wastewater. The capital asset fund is basically, these are our streets, is where we've been using most of this, but there's any town assets that we are adding to or building out of stuff, this is where it usually comes out of. Notice this 575 that was up in the general funds shows up now here, that we're transferring that into the capital asset fund to pay for the road construction and a little bit of a negative carry forward that we had last year. The Cousins Ranch open space is kind of the Lions Pond and that whole master plan. That's where I've been having the most trouble this year as far as deferring projects, moving things back and forth, saving stuff for next year, trying to call things out and reprioritizing what that's going to look like. That's one where it's under our capital projects that were approved. But some of the spending is actually still in specific line items, mostly because this is pretty heavily grant funded, and I need to be able to get reimbursements out of different grants for different items.
So we have not received the $299,000 for the bathrooms.
Nope, we received a portion of it for our deposit on the bathrooms, but until we actually buy the bathrooms, we don't receive that money.
So we would be seeing the revenue then.
Correct.
2023.
Yeah, and that's why this one's kind of bouncing right now, is that until we actually spend the money, we don't get to see the revenue, so I can't declare it in the budget, but we know it's there. And that grant was extended until 2024. So the big stress of getting it done for this year was taken off, which is good because everything is back ordered, and trying to get the bathrooms in the state of Colorado is going to be, they're trying to get state approval right now. Debt service is one that is empty, pretty much. The town has not taken on debt. Something I think that we may need to talk about at some point, but that's going to be something that fund exists, but even though it has lots of zeros, it still sticks out there. And now we get to kind of the water fund and the wastewater fund. And I'm going to talk about these together because they're always linked together, but they are, when comparing them, you can see kind of the difference in what's a healthy fund and what's not entirely a healthy fund. The auditors called it out. The water fund is a weak fund right now. And you can kind of, if you want to look at it in terms of comparison of bottom lines, if you looked at the water fund unassigned reserves that I projected for next year's budget, and the wastewater, you're looking at about $500,000 left over. and almost $4 million left over. And that's because we have some big projects that are coming to these funds, and where we've done, we've made some decisions in the past as a town that kind of how the money flows is what's impacting a lot of this, because a lot of their costs are fairly similar and fairly stable. We defer plan investment fees until CO, which is most construction takes a year to 2 years. In a low interest environment, that's not a big deal, and that takes away a hurdle for someone building. But in a higher interest environment, that's 1 to 2 years. That's kind of $200 to $500 on those plan investment fees on both the water fund and the wastewater side that could be collected earlier. But that's in our code that we defer to CO. So we're losing interest on that spot, but that's not as big a deal as we have in the water fund, the plan investment fees through the metro districts to support regional facilities get paid back to the metro district. And so that the challenge is two pieces. One is the allocation of that money. It goes out of the town coffer. And so it's tied to only regional facilities, when we also now are getting big enough that we need to think about wells and source facilities. And so it basically takes all that money that we're collecting from a plan investment fee and ties it only to one expense. And so that's why when we get to big projects like Byers Avenue and things like that, where we're really messing with a lot of water system stuff, that there's not that investment or the reserves to pay for that. And our fees, quarterly fees, do cover most of the general operations, but are not really at a level to cover all the big capital projects. And so that's where kind of we have some structures, and we've inherited those, but at some point the water fund's going to need a major influx to cover another $2 million project. So that's where debt financing and such would be something that we would want to entertain, or different revenue streams. Does that make sense? Kind of trying to follow the money. And this is one where, Lewis, what you had asked about in the water fund, the capital, and then even in the wastewater fund, I've called out that capital line item, and we've shorted some of the engineering, some of the other individual line items to because it's being rolled into that capital. I'm looking at line 50, 40, 730 in the water fund. And that shows the $2,500,000 or $50,000 capital project.
It was scattered throughout the whole document. Back when that was, yeah,
Sure.
$20 million. Similar
Mhm.
if that's at 4% here, that $800,000 income a year, where is that? Or we're not investing that money? Are we not allowed to invest it?
We're investing it. It's not going to be at a 4%. It's 3%. Now it was lower before. But so the interest numbers that I have here are all out of whack as far as being updated. I basically have to close and then look back at where all the money is and then allocate it to the funds. So I could say, hey, I made 10,000 in interest this month. This is great. But then it gets teased out into little places along the way. So it doesn't show up very well in this budget. But yes, we are earning interest. Mhm. No. Yeah, we're not earning that much on the interest, because at the beginning of the year it was a 0.5%. So it fluctuates depending on, it's a weekly and a monthly roll up for us. It's within Colorado Trust, which allows us to do municipal, like we can't really actively invest it from a statutory standpoint.
Basically, they hold the money and invest it for us.
Mhm. In conservative investments. Yep. Yep.
Anyway, it seems like that's.
Yep.
By the time
There-
the big government takes their hand fee out of it, you get a 0.5%.
And for them, it's
Should they take?
we're in a unique spot with it, because part of that is in the JFOC dollars of that 20. We're holding that. The other part of it is, so it's the advantage of Colorado Trust versus a CD type program is liquidity. I can tap into what we need at any point, which when we went to go put down money for Victoria Village was critical to be able to tap into that. And move large sums when we actually needed it.
So municipalities are not allowed to invest in anything else other than
Yep.
state-run fund.
Well, there are a couple state-run funds that we can invest in. This is the better of the ones that we've looked at.
You just can't go drop it. in one more thing.
Yep.
Invest in that. But you can put it in like a CD ladder at this
Mhm.
point, 3,
Yep.
6, 9, 12 months.
Yep.
Make 4% more.
Yeah, and there's some of that's one of the things I am looking at and saying, okay, are there better ways for us to try to get more out of our money? Without knowing the annual kind of cash flow, ebb and flow. I'm hesitant to jump into a lot of that right now. But it's something that I look at regularly and try to say, okay, is this a good spot? Where I have been, we don't get much on our other accounts. So I run our banking and checking accounts and stuff like that tight. And I'm like weekly, I'm trying to figure out if I'm moving enough money or not to, we need to move some to cover payroll and such. Sorry.
Can we split our money into accounts at this Colorado Trust, like?
So we have 4.
Oh, okay.
And so we are in the ones because I'm preserving most of the principal in there. We're able to get a higher interest rate. The more transactions you run on the account, they're different levels of accounts. The more, the lower rates you get. Right now, I looked at it earlier today, it's 3.04. But that's on a monthly, I think. So, and then to Eileen's, your question. So the water, wastewater, basically we collect plan investment fees. That's for the capital projects. We collect service fees, which takes care of the operations and maintenance of the water systems and such. Then we have our capital projects that are mostly reserve or general fund funded for the bigger projects. And then the JFOC basically bills. The JFOC is a totally separate entity. So they run their operations, and at the end of the month, you say, okay, here's what we spent on operations, and they bill it back to the sanitation districts at a percentage of the EQRs. So they're funded more on where they're funded on a billing cycle of like a B2B billing cycle. Each of the sanitation districts collects fees from their users and then uses that money to help pay the JFOC for operations. So what we charge in sewer fees, and when we bill quarterly, we use that to pay the JFOC. And then the flip side of that, because we're the fiscal agent and there are employees, their salaries are part of the operation that I bill out to the other entities, but the town of Fraser is another entity that we bill and we pay back part of the salaries and such. And then we bill them a management fee at next month, really.
And you do that. And what is the management fee?
I was just,
I mean, how much is it?
it's like 20,000 a year.
20,000 a year?
It gets
Oh.
sliced between the different funds and then it gets sliced between the percentages of EQRs. So I'm like, it's, when I try to look at it on my budget, which we'll pull up in the JFOC budget when we talk about that later tonight, it's basically, it's not a ton of money, but it covers kind of the cost of going through and doing all the billing and such. But it is something that can be amended. It's kind of funny. We could charge more, but then we're also paying percentage of it more.
Only 1/3
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, our net is not great.
We don't charge for. HR function.
I mean, those are lumped in the management fee
Yeah.
and that keeps them as our employees. So it's, if we were not the fiscal agent, I don't know if they would stay our employees, or if they would transfer to somebody else or what. Any questions on any of that?
So the $20,000 is what we get paid from the other two. Right? Is,
So of that, we would net the $20,000 would go in the general billing. So we are paying a portion of that. We pay one portion on the general funds for that, and then another portion on the under the nutrients, because we also split Colorado, our northern pays a portion of that. So there's 4 entities in that distribution. So we probably pay $2,000 to $3,000 to ourselves. And net the 16 or 16, 17. Figures mud on that one.
yeah. that's- Yes, I thought it.
Water.
Just their wastewater.
Just wait.
Just wastewater. And so,
What? Yeah, I thought it was more than that.
so the last piece in here is the Fraser Housing Authority. This is where you are the board of the town, board of trustees for the town of Fraser, but you're also the Fraser Housing Authority Board. And this is where the application or bedroom fees, Pernell, show up as a revenue, the transfer from the general fund, that town board line item for community housing transfers into here. The expenditures, this account is not, or this fund is not fully built out. I was kind of waiting to see what shows up for Victoria Village, because I imagine Victoria Village is really going to be centered on this fund for us for the foreseeable future, and then figure out which accounts we need to add into here. Well, this is only the bedroom fee. The STR license fee is captured up in the revenues in the general fund under community housing. It's tied to that initiative. Yep. Yeah, we were trying to tie it out because application fee is the account code. But I had to put in there bedroom fee because this is the new ordinance. So this, I was guessing, figure we're going to need to do legal fees and a lot of engineering and insurance to get Victoria Village off the ground. And I haven't figured out what else we might be spending that on. I was waiting to see what the proposals from the developers came back, and then you could say, oh, this is stuff that we can, how we need to build out our account structures for expenses.
This is earmarked for affordable housing. A line item for each project. Or each area that is being spent. This is confusing.
Yeah. This was, I mean, this fund, these are the initial accounts that they plugged into the fund. So we can add more, we can change these, but these are all purely, I was like, this is what we inherited for this fund in terms of the account structure. We can add and change things, but I didn't want to build out a full 50 line item expense line if we're only spending out of a couple categories initially.
But all three.
Yep. Any questions, concerns?
Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed, did you?
Well, appreciate everything Rob has done and all of the department has to put this together. We will see some increase in costs no one expected a 40% increase in the electric service fees. So that's gonna be addressed in the coming year and look at some solutions. Victoria Village, we're also doing some additional research to help us find ways so that we can try to make that affordable. We're asking the developer to come in and do all this and build some of the houses to be a certain AMI range. And we're gonna need to find ways that we can reduce those risks and reduce those development costs, so that we can get that within that AMI range that we're charging for. We've got a short window to do that. We've got about 2 years to start construction. From when we received the grant funding, which was September of this year. So we're actually going to be bringing to the board another work session, possibly in December. Some of that structure that we're looking at for what we can do as a town, things like expediting our processing fees. How can we reduce cost for our architectural for infrastructure? There's a ton of grants available right now, federal infrastructure grants. We were at the small community workshop in Salida last week. We got introduced to the massive amounts of grant funds that's flowing into the states and for local municipalities, local communities. Even the Northwest COG is getting dedicated people to help with grant writing and assisting communities that lack some of that capacity. We're exploring all of these. I have a meeting with the Northwest COG, DOLA next week. Attending the conference as well about how we can use other funding for affordable housing purposes. So we'd like to be able to put this research together, do some of the fact finding, and then present to the board in a work session. There's an array of options that we can do. It's all doable. We've got a little time to do that, but we're going to leverage every grant that we can for this. We can layer grants as well, with both federal and state grants for the infrastructure. There's planning grants available because part of these development will require a master plan. Of course, we've got the land itself through another grant. So a lot of good opportunities, but we need to talk about options that the town could do, because these are a lot of this is going to be policy decisions that have to be made by the board.
Those policy decisions we make and grants we find and stuff like that, are we going to offer that to the general community as well?
And
I mean, it makes sense. We want to play it out.
well, yeah, I think what we need to do is look at some of our code that deals with affordable housing. If we're going to change some of our procedures as far as our planning and approvals and so forth, and the review process to expedite these kind of things. You brought this up before, what defines a single unit, what about height restrictions, for affordable housing projects, we might need to adjust our code even more than it is already. So, I'm still working on that list of, I'm probably looking at December, first meeting of December.
Yeah, I just, the county and the towns all talk about affordable housing. And I was doing.
We're doing a lot.
I know we're moving. Right? But I know several projects that people want to do affordable housing and they can't do it because of restrictions to the town or the county. Either of them.
Okay, thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
5
Okay.
minutes,
2 second break,
2 seconds.
about 30 seconds.
Um,
Are we all back? Yeah. Okay, you ready?
I just see that.
Like to call to order the town of Fraser's regular board meeting to order on Wednesday, October 19th. 7:02 PM. May I please have a roll?
Louis Gregory.
Eileen Waldo.
Katie Souls.
Ryan Cirkvenick.
And Philip Vandernell. We have a few changes to make to the agenda. One, I've had requests to take, is it, which, October 5th?
Yes,
So we need to have a discussion about the October 5th meetings minutes. And the Coast Lake on Maine. So if we can move those to,
Just off the consent agenda.
yeah, I'm trying to decide where to.
Usually after a consent agenda, if you take something off after you put the consent agenda, then you address those two that you put off. And we can follow that.
So let's put them, since we have a guest
Mike.
here. Let's put them after. So they'll be number. You know what, let's put them at the end. It's just easier for them.
Okay.
Keep track of that. So minutes,
so GNH.
yeah. Coast Lake. Okay. And then if I can have, is there any other, anybody else have any other?
Well, the
executive session.
executive.
Oh, the executive session. So the executive session, apparently we can't, we're not going to do an executive session, but we're still going to talk about the town manager position tonight. So that would be I guess. Okay, any other before somebody makes a motion? Okay, then
We're just curious, so minutes from October 5th, why are we not?
we'll address those ones.
All right. For the consent agendas, anyone, trustee, staff, maybe even somebody from the audience legally can ask that be removed from a consent agenda. And then it's taken off the consent agenda and then discussed separately. Okay.
Makes sense. Okay. Can I have somebody make a motion to approve with those changes? to the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda for tonight, removing the 2 consent agenda items and not having a executive session.
Okay.
We'll just have a discussion.
Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor?
I,
Opposed? So now, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, which only has the minutes from September 28th and the surety reduction for the Meadows of Grand Park Island.
I so move.
Second.
All in favor?
I,
Opposed? Okay, we are now at open forum, so anybody from the public can address the board. And you'll have 3 minutes, and you just need to raise your hand physically in here or digitally online. And we'll give you 3 minutes and then address and let the town know your name and if you live in the town of Fraser or not. You don't have to give your exact address. Okay, anybody here in the audience? Okay, anybody online? Do we know who Sue is? Because they're unmuted.
She doesn't actually have a mic. She just called in. I was just checking that.
Oh, okay,
There's no option to mute.
okay. And Lisa was the only other one. I don't see any hands being raised. Okay. We are now at discussion and possible action, and the first item is the Fraser River Valley Regional Housing Partnership update, and Mike Johnson is here to update us.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and Board. I'm Mike Johnson. I'm your representative on the Fraser River Valley Housing Partnership. I appreciate your trusting me to carry this out for you. If you ever have any questions, comments, ideas that you'd like us to consider at the Housing Partnership, please feel free to reach out to me directly, because I'm there for all of you. I'm going to give just a quick update of where we've been and where we're going. Some of this is, I'm sure, you know all about it already, so please stop me if it's too much redundant information, and feel free to interrupt me at any time with questions or comments. As you are well aware, based in part on your previous discussion, I'm sure you've had many of these discussions before. We have a real affordable housing issue in the Fraser River Valley. And one of the things that you all contributed to was performing a housing needs assessment for the valley. And some of the results, just some of the highlights from that assessment, are that rents are up over 120%, and average home prices are up over 200% just in the last few years. Rents are also significantly up. Rents, the rent that people can pay for affordable housing. Affordable is usually spending no more than 30% of your income on rent or utilities. 2-bedroom apartments are now 33 to 60% higher than affordable rent for a family of 3 in this area, and costs for owned housing are more than twice as high. We need 750 to 840. This is all from the housing needs assessment, new affordable units in the next few years. And it doesn't look like that's going to get taken care of by the private sector. The private sector is building quite a few units up here, but most of them are much higher end, and very few of them would fit the affordable criteria. You and the town of Winter Park, Granby, and Grand County created the Fraser River Valley Housing Partnership as a regional housing authority that can provide affordable housing, not only to low income individuals, but also to middle income individuals. And just as a test for what is middle income now, the average income in the county is, for a family of 3, is about $79,000. The projects that are being done on the affordable housing by the traditional housing authorities that are formed under state statute are down in the lower end of that. The Fraser River Valley Housing Partnership can provide housing for people in that. It's often referred to as the missing middle, 80 to 120% of area median income. You all and the other governments have contributed money to get the work done so far for the Fraser River Valley Housing Partnership. You've contributed a total of about $160,000. That's not a sustainable long-term way to make this authority run. So in combination with all the local governments, you've studied the problem. There was a needs assessment was done. There were interviews done of people up and down the valley, and it was ultimately determined that the best long-term solution is to create a sustainable, regular, actually a financeable revenue stream. And there is now a ballot question. There will be a ballot quest. There is a ballot question. You've probably already gotten your ballots already. I know I've gotten mine. 2 mills, property tax throughout the valley, which will produce next year approximately $1.2 million to do the work of the partnership. That means that a home that is worth about $500,000 as actual value will pay around $505.64 per month, which is a pretty small property tax increase. Most of the revenue that will be generated by this property tax will be paid by businesses, because of the way business and residential property taxes working in Colorado. Businesses pay about 4 times as much, and by second homeowners, which make up more than half of the housing units up here. The community survey showed that 54% of respondents would support a 2 mil levy without any discussion. And after discussion and explanation of how the partnership was going to work and the kind of work we're going to be doing, that increased to about 64%. So based on that, we're somewhat optimistic that the ballot question will pass. Certainly can't assure that. And I hope that everybody is talking to all their neighbors and friends and everybody you know about the importance of this. I think in your packet, there's another piece of paper that has some statistics from the needs assessment, which I won't go into, but I would like to make sure that everybody is comfortable with and knows what's in the ballot question that people are going to see when they open up their ballot and in order to vote. It's the format of these questions is dictated by the Tabor Amendment to the Constitution. So you've got to start off with how much taxes are expected to go up in the next year. And the tax rate is in there, 2 mills. And you can see the parenthetical up in the first sentence, that $5.64 per month that I mentioned earlier. The ballot question is clear that the money is going to be spent for housing for year-round residents. That's critical for this project. It isn't going to be, for example, it won't be redundant with what it will not support housing for short-term employees at, for example, the Winter Park Resort. And we were just at a bunch of us were just at an opening for the housing that they're going to build on site that the ski area is paying for. The purpose of this is to try to make it clear in the ballot question that this is really to hit the people who aren't currently eligible for other kinds of housing assistance, people right in the middle, teachers, firefighters, police officers, et cetera, the people who do the work, day-to-day work that makes all of our lives work possible up here. It was important in the survey in order to increase support for the tax that we agreed to do a diversity of different kinds of housing structures. And so that's in the ballot question. And it was also important in the survey that the housing would be built throughout the valley. So that's in the fourth bullet up there. The rest of this is just legal language that's required to be put in order to comply with the Constitution and statutes. And that's really about all I have as a sort of an overview of where we've been. The partnership is trying to get around and talking to any group that'll listen to us. There is an active campaign, which we can't be directly involved with, but there's an active campaign that's been going to forums and meeting with people. And I assume they're doing mailings and phone calls and the other kinds of things that campaigns do. And we're right up at the end. So the next 2 weeks here are going to be critical. And if this happens, it'll give us the resources to do all kinds of things and to leverage that money with grants and borrowings and other ways to enhance that money and to do a real regional approach to this housing crisis, which is, of course, a regional crisis. So with that, any questions or comments or anything about what we've been doing or that we should be doing or that we're not doing?
I just have a question, a percentage of full-time residents that are registered voters versus second homeowners or people that aren't registered or don't live here full-time. I assume the latter does not really have they don't
Yeah.
really have a vote, right? It's really the full-time residents or be voting for this in favor of, right?
Right.
And we're taking advantage of the second homeowners that would be paying additional taxes also.
Yes, I mean, this will be paid by, so one of the sheets that I didn't go over has some of the statistics about what the permanent resident compared to second homeowner is up here, and more than 50% of the housing is owned by second homeowners. I'm sorry.
I think it's 37%.
Or-
Will be, people paying in will be first homeowners and then the rest will be second home.
Right.
If it
Yeah.
passes.
Yeah.
Right. So is
Yeah.
that really?
So it'll be
You're
paid by homeowners. Now, homeowners pay at an assessment rate that is about a quarter of what businesses pay. So if you combine the business, the business revenues and the second homeowner revenues, that will be by far the majority of the taxes that are paid are by second homeowners and by businesses.
Yeah, it just seems like that would be a really good point to make to registered voters or full-time people here that's why it's really important to help
Right.
second homeowners, to have second homeowners help shoulder some of the burden of, employee housing.
Right. And you'll see, we did prepare a pro statement that's in the ballot book that makes that point. And the campaign is making that point, and all of us, when we're going around and talking about this, are making that point. So and emphasize that with your neighbors.
My full-time resident neighbors.
Yes, your full-time resident neighbors. Yeah, I mean, this is different than, for example, special district. Special districts, a property owner gets to vote. Here, it's just someone who's actually a registered voter in the valley gets to vote.
Well, the question's well written. It's very clear.
Good, I hope so.
Yeah.
It
Is it-
doesn't confuse anybody.
Yeah.
I think I know the answer to this, but is it one election over the whole district, not 4 different elections?
Yes, it's a single election for the entire district. You all created the district by intergovernmental agreement pursuant to a state statute that allows you to do that. So it'll be the same rate will apply every place in the district. Okay,
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you
Okay.
very much, Mike.
Okay.
Thanks for your service,
Thank
Mike.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your time. with it.
And Ed and Michael have been at all the one or both of them has been at every meeting I've been at, and they've contributed really valuable information. And so if you have questions in the short run, you can grab one of them and they can fill you in. Or as I said, I'm always willing to talk to any of you at any time about what we're doing. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming in.
I would just add too that they do have a website. Anybody listening would like to see, FRVHP.com, which stands for the Fraser River Valley Housing Partnership. And they also have a Facebook page too, that they're pushing out information. If you have some questions, there's a whole Q&A section on their website. Can help clarify some things, as well as a calculator for your property taxes for businesses and for residential homes.
By businesses, commercial real estate is what you're talking about. Make sense.
And just to, because Michael mentioned it, there a lot of, you've probably already read some of the letters in Sky High News about, and other places about concerns about property tax increases, particularly for people on fixed income. And you'll see on the website and in the calculator, there's a calculator for the homestead exemption for people, for seniors who lived in their houses for 10 years who can take advantage of that, and that lowers their overall property tax burden, not just from this tax too. So if someone's concerned about that, you should point them to that place on the website, and they can run the numbers and see the actual effect on them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Rob. Now for the treasurer's report. So we did one we didn't have any of that information in our packet. Did anybody else? I didn't have it in mine.
I didn't either.
Can you, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that study in the pack a while back.
Housing needs.
The housing needs study, we didn't have that. All right.
Right. And internet is posted on our website too.
No, I-
Okay, short and sweet this time. Treasurer's report, we're gonna just hit the main two highlights that we've been going over in the past. First one being it's kind of our statement of funds, where we are, that trend, and then sales tax.
Perfect.
So basically, we're still continuing that upward trend, a little bit slower right now. October should change that a little bit. Right now, kind of speaking to a little bit of the moving operations and funds, operations versus reserves. Basically, we had a bump in sales tax, which moved the blue line up. We had a big shrink in the green because we paid a lot of, payroll and things. And we're waiting for October when people's quarterly utility bills come in, payments come in. So that'll bring the green back up and rebalance this a little bit. So we don't have to tap into reserves. And so we're able to keep the money where it earns more interest. Next. We had the September was the best sales tax month ever, but not really.
But not really.
Sorry. That's the best in history from a monthly standpoint. The challenge there is about 150,000 of that was deferred sales taxes from a prior sales tax policies from the state to give people that the business is a holiday, so it came due. And so most of that is that 150 is basically a bump in deferred taxes that were May and June, where we were a little bit lower. Had we not had that, we'd still be above where we were last year, but not as far.
Okay.
So
Perfect.
we're not going into a new trend of spiking forever up. But we're probably following much more the last 2-year trend. And I don't think we'll have as big a dip in October, November. But that's just kind of that's what it looks like from the graphs, but I'm not sure. But it felt good. I was like, okay.
Is that really August or?
Yeah, so it's basically it arrived in October. It was filing for September, which is really August revenue. August and September, but this, because it was deferred, it went all the way back to essentially May. Because they have the 3-month I think it was May through July was allowed to defer sales tax on certain items for certain businesses. So last, there you go.
Budget to death.
Okay.
There you go.
Questions for Rob? Okay,
Cool.
thank you.
He's not, yeah, he's not.
Okay, next is the Joint Facilities Fund 2023 budget review.
I brought reinforcements for this one. Basically, we are running the Joint Facilities Fund budget through all the sanitation districts so that the JFOC can approve the budget. It doesn't go to the state the same way ours does. This goes as an addendum to our budget. So, do you have a copy of this? I think,
It's in our
okay,
packets.
great. So basically, same kind of methodology we've done with our own budget is looking at what was budgeted for this year. I don't necessarily have all the historical right in this particular sheet, Here's what we've got year to date, year and expected, and then how we're projecting our budget for next year. The JFOC basically runs on about $1 million budget. And it, that runs the wastewater treatment plant, salaries, all that stuff. It runs as its own independent organization and enterprise fund. And it basically is funded by Winter Park Ranch, Grand County #1, Town of Fraser, and Northern basically being billed and contributing to the actual. So the revenue is really coming from those sources rather than from individual users. And this is, you can ask questions about this. If something seems off to you, Joe can tell you that my numbers make no sense or that they're perfectly in line. But really this is just presenting this to you so you know where a portion of our funds are being spent. And then it'll go to the JFOC for actual approval to be added to our budget when we submit it as an addendum.
Okay, salaries, I think is what. Salaries went up,
Which number?
retirement went up. But health insurance went down.
Correct.
Okay,
Why is that?
maybe I should say why.
There you go. So salaries went up because we added another employee for this year.
Okay,
And that employee doesn't bring a lot of extra health insurance. Basically, we were projecting health insurance in prior budgets on employee plus family and such. We don't, our demographics are different in that plant, so I brought them down. So that's
Okay.
why health insurance went down, although because we added a body, FICA and retirement are going to go up because of those contributions. And one salary is paid out of Fund 50. And 3 salaries are paid out of the Fund 40.
What's the, that sludge removal line item went way up. Is that for just the transportation down to the Front Range?
Somewhat, and
That's your favorite topic.
yeah, since we're hauling about 3 times as much sludge. We're have 3 times as much sludge coming into the plant.
And that's the stuff you have to truck down to the Front Range?
Yeah, it's all trucked down to the Front Range. It went up this year 10%, I think, was their increase to us on our line item from Veris Environmental is who hauls it. The main cost increase for us is we have a lot more sludge coming into the plant.
What did they do with the sludge and then why are we shipping it down?
Why are we shipping it down there? Because they have a land application place. We don't have any permitted land application up here.
Is that hard to get?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like trying to permit a landfill.
Wasn't Granby using some of theirs for?
Composting. Yeah. And they now have shut it down and doing the same thing with it.
Really? They're not doing their composting anymore? Wow.
Just seems like there should be.
That's too bad.
more to dry the furnace.
It costs a lot of money. And unfortunately for us with the altitude and that, it would have to be enclosed. And it has to get to a certain temperature and you have to hold it for so long at that temperature. And square footage wise or area wise, it's a lot of space.
So are those all the reasons that Granby had to shut down?
Yes, it's
Expenses.
space, time, how long it takes to digest the sludge. And then to run it through the composter as they were doing in the container. They had to heat it. It's not a lot of heat, but
They have to hold it at 98.5 degrees for 60 days. And so you have to have enough containers to hold all of this
Yeah.
on a 60-day period and a rollover. It's
About how much sludge comes out in 60 days? You gotta, that break when you haul it every 60 days or every,
I'm sorry,
how much sludge comes out in 60 day period? How many tons?
in a 60-day period
Yeah,
for us, last year, years past, it would be 80 times 4, 40 tons maybe. Wet.
yeah.
What?
So that's a lot. We couldn't do that on the train. You can't ship it by train. That's that much.
Yeah, that's real expensive. And then for us to get it over to the train,
Just check.
yeah, that's honestly the price we get. There might be another company that's really getting bigger at it. It's called McDonald Farms.
Yeah.
And when our contract with Veris is up, we'll check pricing with them too to see what the best deal is.
So, I mean, what are we doing about the sludge, the increase in sludge? It seems like there should be some mechanism to charge back these businesses that are contributing to that significant increase. I mean, right?
None of them are though.
What's that?
None of them are.
None of them are
They're
what?
saying none of them are contributing.
Well,
right?
no, they
So
know,
There's-
they know.
Yeah, we,
yeah.
They,
we
they,
know.
And we
everyone
know,
So currently, this is purely my thought, okay? We haven't proven it up, that the breweries and distilleries that we've allowed in to the valley, plus or minus equal the same population we had in the valley prior to them. So they're contributing the waste sludge equal to 3,000 taps.
wow.
It's 3,000 single family equivalents. And based on the numbers with Rob and that, and my numbers on pounds, that's pretty accurate.
right, I
So
mean, it
we're
seems like they
gaining,
should be charged more than a regular residential consumer.
but you can't charge them enough to pay for it. If you did, they could not be in business.
Well,
I mean,
that
it's cost prohibitive.
Would that not incentivize them to do something else with their sludge, like take it, sell it to the farmers or give it away? I don't know.
Can't they filter it out before it goes down the system? Because I know that Barry's Distillery has a bunch that they seem to haul off for cows and stuff that eat. That's what I believe it is.
I can say where this all started is 10 years ago. Okay. And in that time period, I've been very adamant about them dumping and stuff. Over the years, we've started off with nobody dumps anything. And now we're to the point where we're sampling to see actually who is contributing the majority of the waste. Those costs that you guys are asking about, those are going to be on you as the town board and the other districts to charge their customers accordingly.
Right, I mean, I'm just wondering, I don't know how you would do it, but structure, but put an additional charge on them for their contribution to the sludge. And maybe that would help incentivize them to, get rid of it other ways, and that would reduce the amount of sludge coming through the plant.
No,
one of the issues with that is we've gone through this industrial pretreatment program. We started that earlier this year. They completed the program. They presented a draft that says the brewers and distillers are not causing the problem, which intuitively and based on Joe's experience, we just don't believe the results of that study. So we have gone to the extent of actually doing individual sampling, both above and below the locations of the breweries and distilleries in Winter Park and Fraser. It's without any kind of conclusive proof, it's difficult to go to them and say, you have to pay this, especially if they can point to a study that says, well, I'm not causing that problem. So, we're doing the individual sampling over the next 5 to 6 weeks. this will be 24-hour composite sampling that we're doing. And we'll be checking all these locations. And all we need is indication from any of these that yes, the amount of BODs. And when you talk about sludge, the sludge isn't necessarily the spent grains. A lot of these people are actually hauling those off there. The sludge comes from the biological and the suspended solids within the wastewater that comes through there. And then as it goes through the process, you know, to coagulate that and filter that out, that creates that sludge. So, and that level of organic material is 10 times higher than a residential unit. So we want to complete the study, but we've got options that we can pursue after that, including charging them, which would be a financial burden on a contributing business to our economy. Or we can change our ordinance to do what they call a zero discharge into our system, which means that anything that they process would have to be hauled off. Even when they clean the tanks, it would have to go in a separate container and hauled off. Now, a lot of communities are doing that, but again, that's kind of draconian unless we can actually isolate and say, yes, this is definitively the problem. And with the IPP study and the analysis they didn't point to that. But meanwhile, we've got other reports saying, yeah, that's what it is.
Well, just, talking to them on the tour, it was very clear that they could pinpoint it, they could smell it. I mean, I could barely stay in the room for more than 20 seconds. But they said it smelled like a distillery or a brewery when they're discharging all that. And then his team actually goes out and goes around to the business and finds who's, cleaning their tanks or discharging.
Mm-hmm.
So they can pinpoint it. It's just we got to do a better job of monitoring it and being able to document it. Then we can go after them for whatever remedy, right?
And that's what we're trying to do right now.
Yeah. Okay.
And this is a popular topic of the GFOC meeting.
It's like been a very popular topic for about a year now.
Do they know you're doing the,
Honestly,
collection?
for quite some time now, for the better part of a year, we have been sampling at each one of the 3 districts. So we sample the meter pit on Highway 40 by the Lions Ponds. We sample County Road 8 at a meter pit. And then Fraser is a multiplication and subtraction of those 2 meters. So we know what 2 districts are contributing all of the waste. And now it's just pinpointed down to the businesses in those districts that are contributing.
Too bad we can't meter waste like we meter water, but it doesn't work that way.
Honestly, the water meter plays into this too.
how is that so, Joe?
They use a lot of water,
Oh, okay.
lots and lots of water.
But when was the last time, I didn't realize we were making 17 grand a year running a multi-million-dollar. When's the last time we had a raise for the cost management?
It's about 5 years ago, and it's a touch more than that. It's 20 grand per district,
So 5
but it's
years
about
ago,
5 years ago.
So it's time we probably.
Honestly, was when you were seated as the chairman there. That was the last time.
6 years ago. So
6.5.
we should probably be looking
A
at
raise.
a raise. I mean, the other districts are getting sweet fuel.
Yeah, I mean, shouldn't be pegged to a percentage of, I don't know, revenue or expenditures or some way you could have it float instead of just be a static number that 6 years later we.
What that fee paid was about 2/3 of the person that was here. And we had maintained that over the years. That was really where the number came from.
Yeah. we get to something that floats with with whatever inflation or something.
I mean, their revenues are tied to us, and so and their expenses are relatively consistent, except when they're big projects. That's the only delta, because the operations is fairly consistent. So
Yeah, I can say 20 years, these are the most outlandish numbers that I've ever out here. You know, where
for sludge.
sludge and chemicals. The chemicals also are a direct reflection of the sludge too. How much phosphorus we get in.
They've been on a tour also. Many of the brewers went on a tour.
Total. With the winery, the winery's not a big deal. There's 10 total. So what's that? There's 2 distilleries, 8 breweries,
That-
7. Each town of Winter Park, town of Fraser, you guys have number. You're one ahead with a winery. And their water use is about 4,000 gallons on their big quarter, which was last month.
But how many of them have gone on the tour of the plant?
From what?
Of the wastewater plant. Have you haven't gone on the tour and seen the plant?
Yeah, when we had that open house, every brewer, distiller, every one of them walked through the plant.
Is the sludge treated by the alcohol that's being made, or is it?
We have a whole bunch of stuff in the process. So all of the water, but a good washdown water, all the washdown water, some of the wastewater, 1 or 2%. It's very water. So for every gallon is 10 gallons of water. And 8% of that is waste. The guys up here say no, but their water meter says yes.
It's like Coors. Is that something?
Yeah. Yeah, they bought the sewer plant in Golden. It's and it's all of it, the yeast that's in the beer and all that, the bugs that I grow down there. So then it's kind of like giving them steroids, bountifully. So instead of me going off of multiplication factors of 2 to 1, it's like 15 to 1.
Wow.
I know that's a big part of the budget, so.
Hey, Joe?
Thanks,
Johnson,
gentlemen.
is that your HA?
Thank you.
Okay, next is the retention. Yeah, it's the Rob show. tonight.
Yeah. Stool, if you like. Say modified request was done earlier, and the request is to expand the ARPA funding that was set up for paying for 3 things. It was employee retention, supporting businesses that were negatively impacted by COVID, and broadband service to Valley. Those are 3 elements of ARPA that were approved, and the board dedicated funds to support in terms of programs. My request is to expand the recruitment to include retention, so I can basically, looking at the environment I've got right now, looking to do a one-time bonus, not base building, for my employees who are level 400 and below, which meets the essential worker definition under ARPA, so that they're in there, to basically counter some of the other, I'll say, the other offers out there in the Valley right now. Right now, the challenge in the Valley is getting someone with a certification takes time. People with certifications are leaving the valley. And everybody who's here is fighting over the people who have certifications to stay in the valley, and are competing. And so I don't want to lose any really good employees, and these are the ones who were with us when we were short staffed. And so part of it's a thank you to them for being here when it was lean. But also I need to make sure that I retain these employees, because what we found is trying to find somebody new will be a 1 to 2 year process. And all the details are in the packet, and I can go through that, but that was looking at those funds, and the dollar amounts and such are there.
How do you structure the retention bonus? Do they just get as a lump sum, or do they get it, I don't know, in steps, like if they stay another 6 months or a year, they get?
This one would be a lump sum, mostly because I'm at the tail end of the year. And there's a couple things. In our signing bonus, we did 50% on the first paycheck, 50% in the 6 months on the 6 month check. What we're seeing right now is going back to that housing stress. People are trying to make sure that they can make rent through the year. So there's a piece of that where they're like, that's what's driving a lot of people to look elsewhere. And so I would look at this as a lump sum, also because I would rather. So ARPA reporting is an annual thing, and if I can use these funds in a good way and do it in lumps, it's much easier to report that than just like individual drip by month.
So what keeps?
What stops the employee from taking our $4,000 and then taking Winter Park's $4,000
The next week.
Yeah.
The next week.
That's what I'm
Because like
getting at.
Sure.
you're attaching, the way you've presented this to the board is to
Yep.
retain
Yep.
these employees. And if I was looking for a job, take my $4,000 and then go get the $4,000 at the next town.
Part of it's a risk, but part of it's also
How do we stop that risk?
So
you
if we
can't
don't-
eliminate that risk or stop it, because I think if we're saying, hey, we're going to wait and do this and draw this out, I think we're going to end up with people they'll go 3 months and then they can jump ship. I mean, it's at any point someone can jump ship. If we do a bigger commitment at the front end, I think we keep more people over the long haul, because we've said, hey, we think that you're important. We're keeping you here. We've created a good environment. And we're taking some of the initial stress that would make them go somewhere else off the table. It's no guarantee though. And we've lost 2 people who had signing bonuses before they got their second check. But if someone got a signing bonus at, they got the first check and then 6 months later, they get the second check, what's stopping them from jumping ship then? I mean, there's no true way to say financially, whatever we're doing is anchoring you to this.
I guess it just gives me heartburn the way it's been presented to
Sure.
us, is that it's a retention
Mhm.
and there's no guarantee of a retention.
Well, and part of the retention is that they've kind of done it for this point. They've done the work already. We're retaining for a lot of the work that they've already done. And that's where I'm like, okay, how do we keep you now? Like, I'm not tying this to, I need to see X number of days employed, or I need a certification or something like that to get you to the next step. I just need to hang on to the folks that we've got and show them that it's better to work here in Fraser than it is at Winter Park or Grand County or wherever, or Granby, or in the Front Range. And in all honesty, the people who have been in the valley can stay in the valley. It's getting harder, but they can stay in the valley. Someone new can't move to the valley very easily. So what we're looking at is, as people are facing, when your rent goes up $500 a month and you don't have any control over that, then suddenly you're going, oh, where do I look? There's no other place to rent in the valley. The Front Range is the closest place that has enough volume of housing. It's not necessarily affordable housing, but the most volume of housing with salaries that are spiked. And it's a 2 to 3 year process to train up a really good plow driver and a utility operator or wastewater treatment person.
And then I think
Yeah.
the people that are gonna leave are gonna leave.
Yeah.
So I just don't like this way, the way this was presented. to the
Sure.
board,
Sure.
Just,
so, At all. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's just not something, I mean, I've participated in retention bonuses before and they're generally strung out over a period of time. I mean, you could increase the amount and if they leave, then they're just gonna leave money on the table, but to Phil's point, they could collect whatever bonus and they could leave and go somewhere else the next week and we can't do anything about that.
And a more thoughtful retention bonus would be, here's a certain amount and it increases each month that you're here over a period of time. Which is, that would be, we do that with our seasonal gardeners. We do that with other folks. I will say there's not enough volume of people that I've seen in Fraser as far as with the town where I saw that changed their behavior.
You know, like,
The
if we
current-
stop focusing on the retention,
Mhm.
it was titled as retention.
Correct.
These people are way overdue a thank you and some recognition
we
because
just
they've
gave-
been
we just
here
gave 6%.
and they worked
3%,
really
so
hard.
we just did
And
3% and a
these
3%
funds are there.
increase.
And
We have
it's
wonderful-
I just believe that our staff deserves this. I think that they deserve it.
Well, let's call it something else.
And why is this in front of the board?
Because it's a different use of ARPA funds than was originally.
The board has to approve it. It can't be approved by the town manager, because the town manager has always approved bonuses.
Yeah.
And wages. I mean,
And-
it's just the way this was presented to the board and the position that staff has put the board is not a good position.
So the
So
two,
you've put in front of, you've put it in front of us where it's difficult for us to say no. So I definitely have heartburn over it.
and I apologize for that. The real reason that it came in front of the board is it's a different use of ARPA funds and grant funds the grant programs were set up by the board. So if I'm changing how that program's used, I thought that had to be a board approved. And then the original one was because there was a chance of going over budget in a fund, which then would require moving money from the general fund to the fund to cover it. And that is that requires board approval. So it's more the logistics rather than yes, this is a good idea or a bad idea. It's the logistics of how the board has to approve certain uses of finances.
So do we need to approve it?
Well, if the board would like, the board could authorize me to use the ARPA funds for retention.
Bonus.
I don't know.
And I would,
I don't know.
and I would fall into the same kind of guidelines. that
But if the budget goes up, you have to come back.
the budget will go up. The ARPA funds are limited pool of money.
I mean, we have an amazing staff, don't get me wrong. I just, the way this has gone down is not the position I want this board to be in. The future.
Sure.
So,
Heard. And I apologize if that's felt like steamrolling. To me, it was when I've been in schools and stuff and doing public funding, anytime that you have to move money or change a program, it goes to a board.
Yeah, I think, that here could exit for us. Take it. Get that permission, take the fund. Which then in the future gives you a better, edge to fund use it.
I've been here a long time. The manager has always given
No, I know.
bonuses and paying good wages. And
Yeah,
it
but I
hasn't been
understand.
that way the past year.
I don't
So,
understand.
and I understand this is tied up ARPA.
I understand why it's part of it.
No, I.
Yeah. No, I
No,
appreciate,
it should have been presented to us. We've got this money and we would like to give it bonuses to our employees, and that should have been it. And we should have said yes or no. And instead, we're put in this position of. Yeah.
Well,
it's-
one of the kids states, yeah. Things we have to do, Bob's new.
I mean, we did last year.
Mhm.
If you look at the budget, we were talking about, we were only 50% staffing. in place. And I made a proposal for the board to use the ARPA funds for retention bonuses and so forth. So based on that precedent, so a year ago, to change that allocation, I felt it's important to come back to the board for that.
Yeah, I just think the way we presented is to give Ed commissioner power to use the
Gotcha.
fund in a certain way. We don't have.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if,
I know. them all, but
I don't know if Mary Jane's doing a great job and should get a bonus.
That's correct. That's what I'm saying.
I mean, it's a weird, it's a, yeah.
I don't usually bring the individual minutia to the board. This one, just because it moves where the money went or
This
changes
is,
the
I mean,
program.
You can narrow down who these people.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
very
And-
clear who.
And he has.
Okay, so do we,
So-
somebody want to make a motion?
I'll make him, go ahead. You go.
I make a motion that Ed, the town manager, can use the ARPA funds for bonuses or retention of employees that they currently have in the town of Fraser.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Now, you were agreeing, correct, Brian?
Yeah, we're like doing the jumble thing. So I was like, ooh, I hope I got that at the right time.
Uh-huh.
Okay, now we are at Merrick Engineering Master Contract.
Like this one too? Okay. What you have before you, Mayor and trustees, we've been using Merrick Engineering for a number of years, and they're the engineer of infrastructure here in town. And we've been using Merrick on a kind of as a case-by-case basis, where certain procedures are always under individual contracts. Our town code refers to a definition of a town engineer has certain liabilities and certain responsibilities that go along with that. This contract basically groups into that they provide surveys and project management, general engineering services, review, and so forth. They groups that are under one operating contract. It doesn't change the fees that we pay under the individual contracts, but what it does is it consolidates those, and it also names Merrick as the town engineer and gives Merrick those extra rights and responsibilities and authorities to act on the town's behalf. So this is what's before the board. I put a copy of that contract in there. I sent that to Kent for review. He said it was painful to read that contract because it is huge, but it has gone through several edits and several reviews, and this is a good contract. It does spell out those scopes of responsibilities. It does designate Merrick as the town engineer. So I'm seeking approval to sign this. Basically, if you pass the resolution, allow me to sign the contract,
Yeah.
designate him as the town engineer.
It's good. I was just curious if Monica was in on this at all, since she'll be working with them. I'm assuming that she'll be one of the main contacts with Merrick, if she's our project manager.
She's more of a project coordinator. She works, she gets in touch with Merrick on certain elements within the project, to make sure that the plan reviews get processed and returned on time, both for development and also for individual town projects. And she does the same thing with, all of our capital projects, grant administration, and also for our baseline coordination, although we're still bringing a lot of people to the table for the baseline coordination. But again, this doesn't affect how her role is with Merrick.
Yeah.
It's simply a designation of Merrick as the town engineer.
Do they have a local person, or are we paying salary and mileage?
We're not paying salary and mileage. It's a contractual hourly, kind of as a pay-as-you-go service for Merrick. Most of our work with Merrick is passed on to the development community. For example, if Rendezvous brings up and they want to build a new subdivision, that has to go through a process, not only with planning, but also all the civil drawings for the streets, the infrastructure, they go along with it, drainage reviews. All of that is being reviewed by Merrick as part of the development review process. And all of those costs are then passed on back to the developer, and the developer pays those to the town. We pay the bill to Merrick. So those are pass-through costs. The other part of Merrick's contract, if we have let's say Myers Avenue water main replacement, that's our own project. We needed construction drawings. They did the engineering for that. They'll do the construction management for that. But that's part of our cost. And that's related to that rate sheet that's at the end of this. But that's what they're doing already.
So, okay, so the same question applies. Do they have someone local?
No, they do not have anyone local.
So we are paying probably salary and mileage when they come up.
If they need to come up, yes. For our projects, yes. If they're coming up to do an inspection on development, the developer pays that mileage.
Not the mileage, the salary while driving is what I was talking about.
Yeah, they'll pay that cost.
Just a question about I have no idea if their fees are reasonable or not. When we engage them on a project, rephrase that, when we have a project we want done, do we put out an RFP and take bids from different engineering firms or anything, or we just take whatever they?
We do the bid documents for the construction end of that. But we have not taken an RFP to determine who we want to be as our town engineer. We have used other engineering firms though, for some of those projects. For example, the Lions Pond, we're contracting with Element Engineering for the redesign of the water and sewer infrastructure for that project. Merrick will probably do a preliminary review of that to make sure it meets all of our town standards, but that's a case where we're paying an engineer to review an engineer's work. But I think that's just pretty well standard.
How long have we been working with Merrick?
Joe, how long have we been working with Merrick?
A long time?
Well,
Okay.
I mean, it used to be McLaughlin Water in here.
Mhm.
So in that world, we've been working with them, or the town has, since 1964.
Now, is this going to take some of the workload away from you, Joe?
I'm sorry.
Is this going to take some of the extra workload that you had going on away? Or is this just?
I don't hear that great.
Yeah.
And
you talk
Your,
fast.
your extra workload that you had? Didn't you have a bunch of extra duties? Is this going to take some of that away?
No, this is.
Just
sort
like
of
con-
planning stuff.
Oh.
Development.
Okay.
Review, as Ed said, I mean, that's. Do it to them anyway.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
what we've done.
All right.
But he's still slammed with work.
Yeah.
Motion? Question? No motion?
I'll move to approve resolution 2022-1004 Merrick Engineering Master Contract.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Not a very enthusiastic.
Well, I'm just want the bid process and how we select there. I know we've been working with them for a long time. We obviously have a lot of trust in their services, I guess.
Well,
Do we revisit this on an annual basis or periodically to reassess performance? And are there other companies or other firms we might want to look at and provide better service and a cheaper price?
They all charge us.
We,
I mean, technically, perhaps. They're all $25 an hour.
No.
so to answer your question, last year, I did reach out to what's that firm here that Winter Park uses? JVA. JVA is a local firm. I did reach out to them. I had a couple of meetings with them to explore their capacity to take on some of the engineering load that we have here in Fraser, and they just simply don't have the capacity to do that. We've been discussing this particular contract with Merrick for probably about 9 months now. It came up, we've defaulted to Merrick for all on the water and sewer side. We've defaulted to Merrick on the development review side, the engineering and so forth. We were trying to do some of that engineering in-house when Russell Pennington was here, and that wasn't very smooth process. Our public works director was spending most of his time doing engineering work instead of being the public works director. And that caused some issues both internally and externally within the development community. We've tried to do inspection services in-house as well. One of our great utility operators, Nick Reardon upstairs, he's our deputy ORC on the water wastewater side. He started taking on more of that responsibility, but he's not trained as an inspector, but he's very thorough and he's done a fairly good job. But putting our staff in that position, development review and so forth, we also have run into a lot of conflict with at least one of our developers in our community. Now I'm trying to take my staff out of the crosshairs of when we're trying to uphold our standards and people object to that. We have a contract with Merrick to do inspection services for us for developments. And again, those costs are all passed through. They can do some construction management, but that required a separate agreement with Merrick for that limited scope of work. The same thing for other parts, surveys, for example. Surveyors are hard to locate here. We reached out and contracted and had a separate contract with Merrick just to do a survey. This general services contract covers all of that, so that we don't have to have, spend 2 or 3 weeks coordinate a new contract just for a day's worth of work.
So what about inspections on individual house or duplex?
That is by the building department at Winter Park.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they can.
Right.
Or all the way along.
Okay, Becky, we did vote on that, right?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Yes.
Second.
It wasn't a very enthusiastic vote, but it
No.
did pass.
Okay, next is change request for additional work for Pacific Railroad and US 40 sewer design. Is this Ralph? Yep.
No, this one's me.
That's interesting about that. Changing size and the trouble that they had, the larger, it's interesting about the problems that they had. Go ahead. You'll tell us.
Which problems?
You'll talk about it. That under the cut of the highway,
Right. Clark's problems or?
Yeah. Clark's problem.
Yeah. We've had the fortune of having a couple of bores completed recently by Grand Park Development, one under the railroad and also one under US 40. And we've been able to see some of the problems of what they call a drill bore in our soil substrate and the cobbles within our town here. The railroad and the US 40 sewer bore is part of our sewer improvement to increase the capacity and build a larger capacity line that basically runs from the corner of this park here all the way out to Clayton Court. I think that's Doc Susie there. This is a project that was approved and we had budgeted up to $100,000 for the design work for the sewer main replacement. And I kind of spelled out some of the cost estimates. There was $12,000 for initial permitting work for Union Pacific Railroad and preliminary work, and then another 70,000 roughly for geotechnical services. So the total project for the design would come to about $81,000. And like I said, we budgeted up to $100,000 for that. However, during the design and understanding some of the complications of boring in this soils here, we explored an alternate route of doing a bore instead of a drill bore. This is more of an air hammer bore, so you can go with a smaller diameter. This is very popular in Europe. It's been used to a limited basis here in the U.S., but this is a new technology. We embedded this both internally. Merrick also embedded this as well. And the belief is that the smaller diameter bore will save us in the construction cost down in. So that's some value engineering. And we can also do a directional bore with that with a little bit more accuracy, or that's what's hoped. So we'll go from like a 48-inch casing to a 24-inch casing and the cost savings that come from that. But to do that, we basically have to go back and get a new permit with UP, the railroad. The initial permit examined the 40-inch bore. Now we've got to permit it for a smaller bore. So that's an extra cost. And also, as we were getting to the 90% design for that project, we noticed that there was 3 properties there where we didn't have clearly defined easements and property lines. So we need to do some title work with that as well. Together, those 2 changes are about $28,000 worth of additional work. But what is being proposed is that we repurpose about $19,000 that was going to be applied toward the construction administration, and then applying that to this change order. So the actual change order would come up to $10,063. So this is still below the budgeted price of $100,000, but it will require us signing a change order with Merrick. We didn't prepare a resolution for this. We felt that just simply an affirmative vote by the board would authorize me to sign that change order request.
Smaller is better. That works.
Have you already notified the property owners that they need to, that their property line's not defined?
No, the property line is defined. It's about the easements that where we need to do the title work so we can do that easement through
Do
their
they know?
property. They will be contacted once we get this approved.
Is it me?
No, it's not you.
Oh, good.
Would you like it to be you,
Sweet.
Katie? This will run down the alley behind Ace Hardware. And so there's a concrete alley, so it would go down, we have the car wash. There's an empty lot. It runs down that concrete alley. Ace Hardware is there. We have another building with, is it apartments?
Yeah.
Is that Katie?
And then the backside of the creek.
Yeah.
Maybe it is you.
Yeah.
Fishers.
Yeah. Creek.
That's all right. It won't affect you probably.
I was thinking my house actually, but that,
And then
Yeah.
actually, we're lucky, CDOT authorized that we can do an open cut in Highway 40. That will save us a lot of money as well.
Wow.
I don't know how we got that when Clark couldn't, but we feel lucky that that happened. And then the work will continue between the distillery and the Cosley on Main, all the way out to Dock Susie. Then it'll make a turn to the north and connect to our sewer line there on Ron Anderson's property.
Motion.
I'll make a
I
motion.
move that we
Okay.
allow Ed to sign the change order or to sign the check for the change order.
Second.
All in favor?
I
Opposed?
Thank you.
Okay, we are now at minutes from October 5th.
Okay. So, yeah, it's easier to read. So under the discussion on Colorado Main Street, it mentions the committee, which I'm glad to know that, but I don't remember that happening at the meeting. Does anybody else? Do you remember? And so I didn't know if this was the proper way to use minutes.
I remember them mentioning the committee because I made a comment about how had been on the previous year and how overwhelming the task seemed, and we really didn't get anything accomplished. So yes, it was discussed.
The members of the committee?
Paula
The-
Stewart mentioned.
Yep, Paula mentioned it was herself and you.
What?
Paula Stewart went down the list of the people
She
that were
did.
involved. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, isn't that on the YouTube channel?
Or, probably, but I didn't go back.
If you're
No.
satisfied with that, you know, we could approve the minutes, but if you're not, we can go back and review those.
No, if
Okay.
other people remember it, I don't know
Yeah, I remember.
why I didn't hear it. And I guess Philip
I don't
didn't hear it,
remember hearing it either.
so,
Can we verify?
oh, okay.
Can you verify?
It was,
Can
I'm
you
sorry.
verify, please? That you're a note keeper? Can you verify that they listed all these people during that
In the
meeting?
last minutes.
Yeah, in the last meeting.
October 5th.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We will review the
I'll have
video
to
and
review it
verify
'cause I
that
don't,
and bring that
yeah,
back to the
I don't
board.
have it in front of me.
It was
That's
Paula
what I
Stewart.
meant was later.
If you
That's
want.
what I figured.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Not right
Next-
this second.
All right.
Next is the Coast Lake on Main.
Right. The resolution was on the consent agenda, and I wanted it off because I'm voting against the resolution.
Okay.
The timeline presented last month was complete and shows the history of the confusion. But we need to be reminded that the Planning Commission is an advisory group to the town board, and the staff works for the town. The final approval is from the town board. The resolution 2022-0703, which I voted for, was for 4 units. There was no vote at our September 21st meeting deciding that it was 2 versus 4 units, as is stated in the resolution before us tonight. What I have trouble believing is that both the Planning Commission and the staff would allow this shell game of allowing one development to divide itself into 2 for the benefit of separate bonuses at a time when there's a crisis, a housing crisis for the community members, and to a development that is bringing 4,000 more square feet of commercial, which will need employees who will need housing. Affordable housing has been a priority of the town for more than 6 years, at least. Changing to 2 more deed restricted units would cut into their profit margin, but I believe they owe it to the community for their density bonuses on a prime property in downtown Fraser.
Thank you. So we have a,
I'd like to
res-
make a motion to approve resolution 2022-1003,
okay,
cost of government street.
okay, let's go ahead and do a roll call.
Yes, sir.
Oh, a sec, I need a second. Can I have a second?
Which motion? I'm sorry.
Cost Lake?
Coast Lake, Coast
So-
Lake.
So on the 2 buildings, the deed restrictions with their employee housing. So as long as they use all the housing, employee housing, why do we care if it's 4 or 2 that are deed restricted? Since they're planning on using all of it as employee housing.
Based on what?
based on the people that are renting it, based on the people that are building. All of that is employee housing. They're not looking to do this night.
For now.
No, ever.
That's not true. They could rent somebody that's not working. It's a long term. It's not an employee. But that doesn't say anywhere in there that they're gonna rent it to people that are working in our community. It could be somebody that's retired.
I'm
And-
saying workforce housing.
But why are they fighting then for 4 units versus 2?
Because they followed our rules and regulations and got the agreement. We all approved it.
It's in the code.
The code says you have commercial or you restricted units.
Okay.
And
Do we have a second? Somebody want a second?
Is that that's the 2022-10 -003?
I think so. Yeah,
I'll second.
Okay, let's have a roll call.
Katie Fisher, aye.
Say aye. 'Cause it's yes.
You need
Yes,
to put
you-
your, state your.
Louis
last name.
Gregory, aye.
Waldo, no.
Arnold Quinn, no.
Souls, yes.
You
Brian,
voted against.
I think I.
Against the,
You just voted against what you just said.
well, I voted against, sorry, I meant to vote. I didn't know which way she put it. I'm voting against that they have to have a unit.
So,
No, the
this-
motion is to approve
This
the
resolution.
resolution, and you just voted
I didn't
against.
hear the resolution. I heard her conversation.
Yeah.
I thought she was
Parnell
reading
wasn't at the
her-
last meeting, so he
Yeah.
missed that.
it was 2 meetings ago.
Yeah,
meetings
two
ago.
meetings ago. I wasn't,
Which way are you voting?
I'm voting no, that they have to do the deed restriction.
So are you voting in favor of this resolution?
Yes.
Because that's the motion.
Says
Oh,
that they don't have to. do.
Okay. And
I'm
Brian,
I'm lost. You
Yeah.
voting, are you
Yes.
voting yes for the resolution?
Yes, for the resolution.
Thank you.
Brian
Yes for the resolution.
and Vander Nail, no. 5-2.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
As much as I personally don't like it, it's in the code for the overlay, you
No,
know?
it's not. The way they,
Is it-
No.
the way they piecemealed it was a staff and them that you could tell because of those emails. We didn't know that was happening. So,
It's in the
And
code
it
on
was
overlay
also-
district if it was-
They piecemealed it. They totally piecemealed it.
And we did not vote for it at the last meeting, as it states in the resolution. Or we did not approve it as,
And the staff works for the town or for the board. And so does the planning commission as an advisor. So a deal made with the staff and developer doesn't hold the final decision. Is right. Okay. Next is the manager discussion. So a couple, was it 1 or 2 or 3? How many of our meetings ago, Ed has let us know that he will be with the town of Fraser only through March of this next year. I don't want us to be in a time crunch and wait until March to start looking for the town manager. So we need to start looking for a new town manager. And I would suggest we put out, just like we did the last time, is to put it out and see who applies. I don't know if we want to use Staffney again, or even if he would do it again. He's already done it twice. So I just want to put this out there that we need to get, we don't, because the holidays are coming up and it'll be March before we know it, and we
Right.
won't have a town manager. So we need to be actively putting together the job description. You guys probably already have that, and putting it out to where we can start getting people applying.
So I'd make a suggestion that we see if Michael thinks he's ready.
Yeah, so that's, he can apply.
Statutorily, and Kent reminded me of this, and I sent an email out this week, statutorily, it is an open process. It does require posting, whatever the decision of the board is immaterial. Sometimes I've looked at, why is this community advertising when they simply hired their assistant? Well, statutorily, they have to do a search. So there's a couple ways that the town can do that. I think it could be done quickly and efficiently. I would not recommend a recruiting firm. I think that's an extra cost that's unnecessary. I have done a lot of recruitments in-house, including the town manager recruitment in-house when I worked in Illinois. A couple of $100 to get it posted on a couple of websites with a 30-day window. You get responses back, and then it could be up to the board at that point to put together maybe a review committee, a selection committee, and then make a decision. But it could be done fairly quickly.
What about through CML? Other contacts through the state that we can access?
When you say contacts at the state, we would advertise.
Well,
Typically, you can advertise those positions on CML. You can advertise, and they'll do that for free. There's a CCCMA website, Colorado City County Managers. They'll advertise for free. There's a national firm, ICMA. It costs about $300 to advertise with them, and you'll get national exposure for that. But we have in our records, we have the job description, we have the salary band, we have all the information to put together the job ad itself, and put the notice out there in a timely manner. Another way to go about that is maybe appoint two trustees or, a subcommittee that could discuss the best way to go about doing that.
So are you looking to us for approval to post a position or start advertising for a position?
No, we are giving direction.
Yeah.
We don't need to put their approval.
I'm not
We're
looking for
giving them
approval here.
direction.
Okay.
I'm just throwing out some suggestions.
I'm just wondering if we don't get anybody we think is really strong, then should we look at maybe engaging and recruiting a recruiter or, someone, a professional that really could broaden the net a little bit more, but just a thought. At some point, if we're not happy with the applicants we're getting.
You could certainly go that route. We did an in-house recruitment for the public works director. We didn't get any people that we felt were viable candidates. We went through a recruiting firm, KRW. KRW's fees are a percentage based on the salary range. So for the town manager position, those fees would probably be in the $50,000 range to go through a recruitment firm.
Could be money well spent, but anyway, cross that bridge.
Could stay for less than a
Do what?
year.
Good money's wasted
Or-
too.
Could be, but
We might not be able to retain them.
Michael can apply if you want
What's
the
that?
job.
We might not be able to retain them.
Right. Okay,
You never know.
okay, so what's the board's pleasure?
So I'd say have Ed go ahead and start that process of putting the word out for applications.
So
Put
let's,
it up and then we can see who comes down the pike, and then January, February, hopefully we can take a look at those folks that are interested. Including Michael.
We could have an advertisement out by the first week of November.
yeah, we need to be, we don't want to wait until January.
Well, but we don't have to. And it's, the holidays are coming.
I don't care about
Holidays are coming.
I work,
I know,
I
but
work, I
there's-
work every holiday. What do you do? Just because you're
There's
retired.
just 3 days that are holidays,
Okay.
3 days.
Okay, so we need, maybe at the next meeting, the next regular meeting, maybe staff can put together a timeline of,
Sure.
and then action items and where we're going to be advertising would be wonderful. And then we
Okay.
can say, is that all right?
Yeah, that sounds good.
And one other point, I do have a meeting with John Stabney next week. We're talking about his potential to help us with grants and so forth. I will put it in his ear to see if he would be interested in assisting in that as well.
Thank you. Updates. Did I make it through all the extra?
You did.
You did.
Perfect.
Public service manager, director. Right? What's the current on that?
The Public Works Director recruitment. We made an offer today to a very qualified candidate. and we are waiting for his response on that. He said he would be back with us by the end of this week. So I'm very encouraged by that, by the search using KRW.
Is he gonna have a hard time finding a place to live?
Probably. And I had a frank conversation about some of the challenges with that today, but he's very interested in coming here. I guess what he passed through the region some years back, loved it, and was always looking for an opportunity to come back. This just worked out for him.
That's how I got here.
Any other updates?
So I have a question. Do you know the frontage road? It was open, the turnoff in the Safeway, that one way by the ponds, and now it's closed again. Do you know why?
We're waiting for an inspection. Clark did his Highway 40 bore there. He did a patch on the roadway. We need to do an inspection to make sure that the road is safe for travel and that the infrastructure they installed met our specifications.
Okay, so he just opened it up a little premature.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just curious.
What was the projected timeline on that? Was it all summer to do one bore? It was ridiculous.
Well, if he hadn't run into so many boring problems, it would probably ended, a month or so ago. But, the nice thing about this bore was he had the right team doing the work. They was working with us and working with Merrick. Every time they ran into a problem, they'd stop the work. And then they would ask a question. It's called a request for information to get feedback from our engineers about their proposed solution to the path. I mean, one of the bores that they did, it came off of the railroad, which is way off. And now they're actually redoing the railroad bore because there's like a 25-foot sag in the line. So
Just because of the soil?
yeah, a lot of issues with that.
Okay, any other updates?
There will be a special meeting on next Wednesday night for an executive session. We have more information from John Camille and Tim Zarlingo and Kent to talk about the Metro District Service Plan. Again, because of the nature of this, we wanted to set aside a special session so we can, I think they're going to be looking for some recommendations from the board at that meeting.
I thought we decided to postpone that discussion until next spring. Metro District
Well,
Board
any
was.
action.
that?
Action. On it. Go ahead.
Before any action, right, but
Oh, I was thinking action on the metro districts.
We still need to keep things going. So
And we
we
need,
need to be informed.
and we need.
I can't imagine they're gonna say,
one way. My experience is we forget what we did the last meeting, and if we wait 6 months, then we're just gonna keep having to rehash it. Anyway, that's fine. That just seems like that's maybe a little premature.
Because by May, we might forget. Is that
Yeah,
what you're saying?
exactly. That just happened 2 or 3 times.
we all know this is gonna end up in an email blast. Town board forgets. Did they really vote for 2 or 4? Okay.
Sky High News. Gonna
Any other-
field it with us.
Now, somebody else is gonna have it.
I moved to adjourn.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?